Founder Therapy. Everything you wanted to know about HR and operations. My name is Katie Whitcraft, and I'm one of the co-founders of ScaleSpark. Sitting to my left is Jennifer Lawrence from Centricity Solutions. And to her left is Tina Peng, who is the former SVP of Ops and Chief of Staff for Raydiant. Jennifer, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks for joining us. I'm Jennifer. My company is Centricity Solutions, made up in my kitchen. It's a combined word of centralized simplicity. Company was founded in 2007 as a result of working for a PEO, professional employer organization, that was gobbled up by TriNet, which is still in operations as a PEO. As a founder, I thought, number one, I'm not doing this again for somebody else. And number two, and I got a roof out of the deal. So after bringing on about 80% of the clients that I sat with and had to pass them over, didn't love that environment, didn't love what I saw kind of happening behind the scenes. Worked as a consultant for 3 different PEOs that summer and thought, I think there's a better mousetrap. And for me, that meant I want to be the Nordstrom provider of customer service, HR content knowledge, and just be that person and that company that our clients can come to when they're just wondering how to get through a situation, and also want help just wrapping their arms around how to manage and administer and outsource payroll, HR, benefits, compliance. So we took that idea of that PEO, and I think we were probably the original ASO, Administrative Service Organization, meaning that all of our clients own and sponsor their own insurance benefits, but we go to market, we do all the due diligence, we put together the cost analysis and present to them what makes sense based on where they are with their growth, where they see themselves, and what their budget is. So as a result, we've now been in business for a very long time, and we're still a boutique player, but we compete very, very well with our local PEOs, the Gustos of the world, Zenefits, which is now owned by TriNet. And I think a large part of that is just simply that we've never been a sales organization. We've grown the business through referrals, relationships like this, and just really being available to, and my thought has always been, if it's not the right time, kind of what goes around comes around. If I provide good advice, a potential client may not come on board for 6 months, for a year, for 2 years, but it all comes full circle. And we've been able to grow the company and provide what I feel is excellent customer service, but also help them align with where they need to be in the marketplace. So really in a nutshell, if you kind of conceptually think about it, we're helping the employees with questions on payroll benefits. We're helping the management team understand how to deal with maybe sticky situation, employee relations, how to navigate performance improvement plans, or even termination sometimes. So often we'll be on the phone with clients helping them navigate through that. And the executive team or CEO, are they getting their bang for their buck by outsourcing this relationship? So I'll hand it over to Tina.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Tina Peng. I was most recently SVP of Operations at Raydiant. It's a B2B SaaS startup. We did everything from, supporting the founder to fundraise, as well as bringing people on, navigating through layoffs as well. So happy to share any of my experience, which is a little different from Jennifer's experience because we did HR all in-house. So happy to share that. Earlier in my career, I actually spent some time in real estate private equity as well as consulting. So I definitely have a wide range of experience on how operations can really help startups and companies grow. At home, I have an 18-month-old, so I definitely learned how to negotiate under pressure. But yeah, really happy to be here.
So whatever level you're at today, we're going to try and talk a bit about those different situations. But I will say at the end of this event, we'll have a form that you can get from the QR code at the end and answer some questions, and it'll give you the kind of platform or level that you might be at currently. So hopefully that helps you a little bit to determine where you should be at versus where you're at. So as far as where we're starting, we're going to talk about common pain points. What's the first sign that your startup's chaos isn't normal startup chaos, but an ops or HR red flag? And Tina, we'll start with you.
I would say when you're finding yourself like just spending a lot of time repeating yourself or really be the therapist to people, I think that's when there's a big problem. I do think that bringing someone in operations or chief of staff on board early on in your journey can really help you make sure everything's organized properly, documenting everything, at least having that source of truth that everyone can rely on. You know, people come and go in startups especially, right? So a lot of that knowledge could be lost when people leave. So definitely having that, you know, whether if it's a Notion or Google Doc, you know, having that one central place with all the information there can really help. And that really isn't the founder's role. That's really operations, HR, whether it's living in the system, like Rippling or Gusto, but that's really, I think, very important.
Yeah, I agree. I think to piggyback on that, we work with clients that might have just received some funding, or there are 140 people. I mean, it's really the full gamut. And I think what I hear from the founders, because they are wearing so many hats, is this is what's keeping me up at night. Now I need to hire people. Where do I start? I mean, we all know about recruiting, but really and also, I've started this company with friends and family, and suddenly I need to let one of them go. Really painful, really difficult, but it's really, really common, and it sucks because it's never a great conversation. So how do we navigate through that? So quite often, it's that or health insurance, which we can go to market, we can shop plans. That's easy to solve for. But just understanding, you know, kind of that ROI, and people think they're saving money, but when you're looking at what you really should be focusing your time and energy on, what a managed service can do is such an incredible cost savings if you look at the peace of mind and if you have the right partner. And I am a huge, huge fan of need to have versus nice to have. A lot of companies start with, we're going to do all these great things, and we're going to have this amazing culture, and we're going to bring everything to the table for these employees. It doesn't matter, because I have lived through the lunch times and the free breakfast and the chair massages, and everyone gets all these great things. And they were still struggling with retention. And I am personally, one of my things I'm most proud of at my own company, and I was a founder, I get it. I mean, I was thinking, can we do this? How do we find the money? Blah, blah, blah. But is tenure. I mean, we have people with us now that have celebrated 13, 14 years of service, and that means the world to me. But there's a reason why that happens and how that happens. Because you cannot be everything to everyone. It's impossible. So I think when you start feeling like, I'm going to continue to teach myself all these things and how to register for state payroll, unemployment insurance, and I've got a claim, and now I've got people living in 5 states. and what are the compliance behind that? And yes, today we still have mandated harassment prevention training. In New York, it's 1 employee. In California, it's 5 employees. How do I keep up with that? Where's the proof of burden stored? Blah, blah, blah. So the liability is something that can easily be solved for, but I really see founders spinning their wheels. And it can be a half-hour conversation. Great, looks like you've got that figured out. If not, here's what we can do to help, or there's other companies that can do that if we're too robust.
Yeah, I think I've seen a lot of pain points. I've lived through a lot of them myself. But I think where a lot of people feel that pain is in that HR space, because there is such huge liability. For those of us who have worked in the California system, there are a lot of protections for employees that employers have to comply with in California, and it's very important that you do that, because it can only take one significant miss of something that you're supposed to, a misclassification of employees, things like that, and there are large-scale fines as well as problems with the state of California if you do that. So knowing those, having someone in your corner, having the resource to make sure that you're covering all your bases, the documentation, so your employees know the expectations. It's setting those expectations and sticking to them in the HR world so that can really help you in dealing with your people. So in the different stages of startups that we've seen, there's founders try and take on a lot. And you mentioned bringing on a chief of staff very early. I definitely agree. An HR person to do that is very important. But a lot of startups end up leaving their operational staff till late. They're focused on product, they're focused on revenue, they're focused on a lot of things. So what are some of the things that you can't ignore? Why is it so important to bring on that kind of HR position, HR service, all of those things so early? Jennifer, you mentioned compliance, but what are some of the things you've seen founders caught off guard with compliance specifically?
I mean, there's several. One of the things that comes to mind is independent contractors versus employee classification. Independent contractors are not employees. They are not a W-2 employee. The biggest problem that we see, and I've never not seen it, is unemployment claims, because sure enough, an independent contractor will go to the state, they'll file unemployment, the state will start a claim, they will say, sounds like you should have been treated as an employee, the EDD, whatever state you're in California, EDD, they'll go to that employer, they'll say this person is owed back time off, benefits, et cetera, because they really didn't meet the IRS checklist of being a true independent contractor. And that has been a constant that I've seen, especially with young companies. And most often, the independent contractor doesn't even realize that they really aren't eligible for unemployment insurance. So they'll start that process unknowingly. Sometimes it's knowingly because they'll have educated themselves. And unfortunately, it's one of those things that we like to go in and at least set the stage for here are the basics that we can do to hopefully avoid any mishaps down the road. And it might be as simple as, you mentioned classification, part-time, full-time, temporary employee classification, maybe exempt or non-exempt, minimum wage. So there's all sorts of classifications that we can establish. Offer letters, I'm like, do not try to avoid employment agreements. keep it simple. Let's do offer letters. Let's put as little as possible in that offer letter because you don't want it to appear as a contract. I have seen that bite employers in the butt many times because they have loaded up an offer letter that reads like an employment contract. And you really don't have to do that. But I would also say that in my experience of multiple years, I think people that work for you want to understand basic policy. Over the years, we've gone through balancing time off versus unlimited time off. What exactly does that mean? So we have put together an entire thing on, here are the pitfalls of unlimited time off, because I've also seen that really burn employers and or create a feeling of imbalance amongst their employees and coworkers, because it's really lead by example, right? And people are afraid to take time off when there is unlimited time off.
It's interesting that you brought up the challenge between having, unlimited time off or set time, because I think we went through the same kind of question, trying to debate what is better. When I first started at the company, we had unlimited time off, and we find that there's definitely a group of people who continue to really take advantage of those, and there are people who just doesn't really take any time off. And especially like at the exec level, a lot of people just end up, working through the holidays, and their teams will see that and take that as the lead and not take any time off or feel bad taking time off. So that's definitely a hotly debated topic. The question was, why do we think it's important to bring operations in early on in the journey? And I think from my perspective, and having gone through a couple different startups, I find that a lot of times when companies start, you bring on all these great people, they have a lot of great ideas, and I think the challenge there is that there isn't really anyone that would take things and really execute. And I would say operations is that backbone for the company to really take these ideas and really figure out how to execute. And sometimes you have the product team, you have the engineering team, they're moving at such fast pace, they are moving in silos and not really working potentially towards the same goal, or things are pivoting. So we really need that person in operation to say, hey, by the way, something changed, or this may not work because so-and-so is working on something different. So you need that glue in operation to really help the company move forward together. So I think, overall, operations is a very key hire.
I definitely agree.
Can I touch on one thing, really, operationally? Job descriptions. Super snoozer, I get it, but write a job description or get some help, because operationally, I promise it will help understand where you may have holes and gaps and skill set, because quite often our younger companies will hire someone without really having clearly defined the role, and then they have to let this poor person go because they're unable to perform their job.
So a couple things just to really hit home for everyone is that we have said documentation probably 5, 6, 7, I lost count how many times we talked about different types of documentation. It's key. That is the biggest catch you can make early on, I think, because good documentation around these type of things, around HR, around policies, around the expectations, so job descriptions, standard operating procedures, all of those things. When you document something, it's not just to have it in writing. It's not just busy work for you, I promise. It's very vital to how, when you bring on a new hire, do you want to sit with them for 6 hours and then they're going to catch maybe the first hour and they're going to remember every couple of words after that? Or do you want something they can look back at and know what the expectations are and have that documentation and searchability of that documentation to make sure that the expectations are clear and everyone knows the rules? Everyone in the AI world, you hear it over and over, the guardrails. Documentation is the guardrails for HR. It's very, very necessary. So, Tina, you mentioned that these companies bring on kind of the operations last, and you've said that the companies are siloed a lot of times. So what do you think founders misunderstand the most about operations and how it works?
I think that founders sometimes just think that it's back office, and it doesn't really, it's like the last person to know everything. Not at my company, that's why there's a chief of staff. I was really involved in everything. We're in exec meetings, trying to figure out, how to move things forward, right? But I think when founders think, hey, there's operations is really kind of the last thing on your list, I think a lot of times it really, it puts a lot of ideas on hold. People will talk about a lot of different things in a meeting, and kind of you have these recurring meetings, and you come back, and then everyone's like, hey, have we, did anyone check if something's done ahead of time? And typically, because everyone's moving so fast-paced, people look back and say, oh, actually, yes, so-and-so meant to do it, but, we didn't get a chance to do it. So I do think that that's one thing that is sometimes founders could kind of misunderstand the role of operations. And like you mentioned, operations spans not just kind of your sales ops or rev op, right? There is finance to it. There is so many other aspects. So I think having someone that is knowledgeable and really can connect the dots and be that glue, I think that's really important.
As far as both HR and operations, there's a cost to inefficiency, I think, that gets overlooked a lot. We've talked about the cost of non-compliance a little bit and how much that can cost you. But I think with the cost that's involved when your operations aren't efficient, both just with HR, but just operations in general. So I'd like to hear from you guys on what is that hidden ops cost of not being efficient.
I like this question. So first of all, what comes to mind for me is employee liability or employment practices liability. For my clients that have 7, 8, 10 employees, and they're projecting growth, I want everyone to get what's called an EPL, Employment Practices Liability Insurance Policy. That will protect you in the event of any employment-related claim or tort. I would suggest a $25,000 to $50,000 deductible, because I promise you, when these things escalate, most often, instead of relying even on these things, people just settle. And when I say settle, it's for $100,000 up to $500,000. Because especially in California, the proof of burden is on the employer. And if you have not documented, and HR is about consistency. In its simplest form, it is about being consistent. If you know within 3 to 4 weeks that this is not the right person for your team, rip the Band-Aid. I am such a rip the Band-Aid HR person. It's not the right fit. It's not going to magically turn itself around. And I see it time and time again. Well, last year we had the same problem with, and I'm like, oh my God, this has been going on. So we really want to help and know, hey, listen, if this isn't the right thing, let's help you move this person out with dignity and respect and make sure that we can handle this appropriately. But performance reviews are constantly put on the back burner. If you do them once a year and don't do them for another 2 years, do not do them at all, because it starts becoming negative versus a positive thing, and they don't have to be negative. But it really should be a monthly check-in with your team and like, hey, this is great. I love how you're doing this. Here's what I think we should focus some of our time on. And let's start documenting that. And all that means is you have a meeting with an employee, you sit, you go back to your desk, you send an email saying, hey, just here's what we talked about. They don't even have to reply, but you've documented it. And I honestly can't tell you, our biggest frustration internally is there's no documentation. There's no document. We want to fire them. We're done, Friday. And I'm like, okay, well, we can't do that because actually you have to have a check for them by tomorrow too. So it's just, it's so common, yet it's so frustrating to me as a practitioner in this area, because I'm like, gosh, we've talked about this so many times. So I would really, it would benefit everyone to just have those transparent discussions. It is not illegal for you to be unhappy with someone's work product. It's not. Don't be afraid of the conversation. Managers are being paid to manage. They are not the best friends of their colleagues. You have to be able to draw the line in the sand to a certain degree. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's not a company-wide vote. Sometimes that is the hard part of owning a company, being a founder, running the company. You have to make those decisions, but I would encourage everyone to make them as quickly and efficiently as you can to also benefit the person that's in that role. So ongoing performance assessments, documentation is critical.
Hidden costs. I think about this topic way too much because I've seen startups go well and startups that don't do so well. And I think for startups, the two biggest costs, your cost drivers are your people and the systems. And by systems, I mean tools. And for people, on the people side, I think some of the hidden costs could be, like Jennifer mentioned, people that are staying longer than they should be. So that's definitely a hidden cost. And every time you turn people, right, there's going to be knowledge lost. That's another hidden cost, to have to train people again. And if you don't have great onboarding process, then it may take someone new longer to be onboarded. But really on the system side, I see so many times where companies will just add new tools and people will sign up for new tools. And sometimes there's, even just a project management tool, different teams will be using different tools, which is really frustrating. So I think, making sure that your system and tools is working for your team across the company, and having, that one central place where everyone can see, hey, like so-and-so's using this tool, like this is the tool or this is the process we're using now, and really implement that across the board, I think is really important. These days, I feel like SaaS sales teams are too good, so you end up really just like signing up for sometimes even a trial, and it converts into a full. Those really, really add up, and tools can really get expensive these days. So.
Yes.
When you do your offer letter, are you putting in arbitration agreements?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, her question was about arbitration letters being an attachment to an offer letter. Generally, it can be a statement, but it depends on the states. So unfortunately, there's been so much movement, especially in the last 4 to 5 years, of employees moving to different states, that would be something that I would say, let's look at that together and decide what makes sense. But so yes and no, but it has to be updated. And those are the templates that often get forgotten in that onboarding packet, along with the ND, non-disclosure, or the proprietary information agreement. So there's all sorts of things that clients want, and those are the basics, but yeah. And quickly on the hidden costs, I wanted to touch on that total human capital cost because it's not just salary, it's everything that touches us employees. For everyone in this room, it's an average of 17 to 22% over the salary is what your total human capital cost is per employee. So I always like to kind of educate on that too.
And just off of that, and based on what both Tina and Jennifer said, that human capital costs, those hidden costs, are the soft costs and the hard costs of transition. So if you keep someone around for too long, if you do not rip the Band-Aid off, which happens a lot when you're in a startup and you've hired a bunch of friends and family, and having those hard conversations gets way harder. And they can't stay around for long, so you're paying their salary and their total cost for X number of time. And then when you go to transition, it's the soft cost of the loss of information. It's the soft cost of the time loss on what they were working on. It's the loss on what you need to pay to hire, whether that's listing the job, taking the time off of other staff schedule to interview them, all of those soft costs that no one really thinks about. That doesn't cost anything. That's just time. Time is a cost. If you're a founder, if you are an HR person, if you are an ops person, time costs you money. You are not made of time. No one is. And so you really have to think about those hidden costs of how much time it takes. And that's, I'm going to talk about freemium for a second, because this is the worst thing to ever happen to all of us. Freemium sounds so good. Try this for free, for a week, for a month, because you put your card details in right at the beginning, and then what is the first thing you do? Forget it. And then all of a sudden it's 7 days later or it's 30 days later, and this charge just happens. And it will continue to happen for months, for years, and you would be shocked at how hard it is to get out of these situations with some companies, to stop subscribing. So I have a real problem with freemium. If that's your model that you're using, totally get it. It does work for a reason, but it's like the gym membership. You think you're going to be a better person than you were last year, and you sign up for the gym, and then 18 months later you're like, I went to the gym twice. That counts, right? In startups it's even harder, because you do have different team members grabbing different tools or saying we have to use this or we have to use that, or I really want to try this, and then you never go back to it because it's another thing on the list. And that's where operations very quickly spin out of control, and those hidden costs. And do you know what your burn rate is? Possibly. How many founders here know what their burn rate is, their monthly burn? Yeah? Great. Do you know how many payments are going to come out of your account in the next 14 days? Are you sure? Just as an exercise, think about what those are going to be in the next 14 days. Write them down tonight, and then see how correct you are. Because I can guarantee there's at least 2 charges that you didn't even think about. Because that's what happens. Those are those hidden costs. All right, so we talked about HR and ops all day today, but we're going to talk about it a little more, because HR and operations have to be aligned. If they're not, it creates a mess. And what does that mean? When something happens in HR, the ops team has to do a bunch of things as well. So I just want to touch on that briefly. How does that work together? What's the way you've seen it work best together? And what's this way you've seen it work least well together? Oh, we'll start with Tina.
They really do come hand in hand. I think at Raydiant, I sit literally next to the HR person. So we would talk all day when as issues come up. We get emails in, we'll talk about how to resolve different issues, and that way we're both aligned on the communication, the strategy behind it. So anytime anyone have questions for us, one of us can answer. So I think that's really important and really allowed us to move fast while in sync together. I think an example of that is, when we're going through layoffs, anytime. And, things can happen, right? In the perfect world, you have your plan in place. This is when the communication go out. This is when I have the meetings. These person give me computer back, shut off access. But in the real world, it never really worked like that. Like, some people call in sick, some people don't show up, some people don't give you the computer back. So it really, or sometimes manager would ask for, extension of time for them to finish some work. So, being really working hand in hand together really helps to make the process a lot easier.
I would say I usually see a disagreement between finance and HR. Finance thinks that take you like 15 minutes, and the HR person's like, no, like 3 days. And so usually there's a pretty big disconnect and not ops, but on the finance side versus the HR side, because they're both very passionate about what they do, but the time consumption misalignment is something I see quite often. And I'll usually kind of sit there like a tennis match and pickleball, but and see the back and forth, and I'm saying, well, actually, here's about what the time that it would take to implement this policy or create the policy, get the policy distributed, et cetera. So I think ops, HR are so critical. And another big mistake I see is young companies hiring like a CPO, Chief People Ops, at a really high salary. And I kind of go back to that need to have versus nice to have. And I have some dear friends that are Chief People Officers, but you just probably don't need certain positions until you're really ready for that. And I see that, I get the enthusiasm, and I get wanting to share that maybe with the board or the venture capital people that are supporting your company. But there are certain things I see that I'm like, gosh, that seems a little extreme right now. And so, we'll kind of just softly advise and consult on that and try to drill down to, okay, why do you need that right now? And what's the purpose of that role? Because I don't know about your experience, but I think a lot of us have already lived that, where you'll see a fully loaded team and then they're worried about revenue. And meanwhile, they have a, $1 million payroll that maybe isn't necessary.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with both of you. I think there is that push and pull. It's a little funny to me because I've in my roles I cover usually finance and HR. I do have fights with myself, don't worry. But there is that idea of the money and the people kind of pulling from either end of the spectrum. And even with HR and ops, the reason that they need to work together so well is because they pull, everything's pulling from the same bag of resources, from the same time resources, from the same money resources. All of that's coming from one pot. And so there is a little push and pull of like what matters. So having those two people really talk to each other, the two systems, whatever those systems might look like, really engage with each other is super important, And so we're gonna talk a little bit about the tools and resources that we like, and perhaps what we don't like. Jennifer knows that there's a certain tool that I really dislike. But we'll start off with, for founders that are just starting to systematize their HR and or their ops, what do you think the greatest tool or resource they can use is?
I mean, at a bare minimum, hire a payroll company. Like, you don't have to do this on QuickBooks. And I just think having that tax filing service is huge. It's a relief. They will not apply for your unemployment insurance accounts or your withholding accounts. One of my first jobs out of college was ADP, and I thought, I hate payroll. And then I owned a payroll company. But I'll never forget, I think it was on Second, sitting with a client, and they had 17 states where they assumed Paychex was filing or had applied for their UI. They weren't looking at their reports. They never noticed the money didn't leave their bank account. So I'm like, no, see right here where it says that this is what you owe. And so just hire a payroll company if you only need payroll. It's really the starting point of having employees. I would say that would just be critical. Health insurance, I know, is a hot topic. And those are things that unless you've started a payroll service, you can't just magically have health insurance. The carriers want to make sure you're a real company. They want to see historical payroll. They want to see at least 2 weeks. They want you registered with the Secretary of State. You got to show in the portal. So these are the things that we consult on as here's what we need to do first. Because you're not going to get your payroll started tomorrow. We still have to get these tax numbers and things like that, and here's how we do it. Get your workers' compensation. You're not allowed to have employees unless they are covered by work comp. Quite often I'll be like, oh, you've been paying employees for 6 months and you still don't have work comp. So knock on wood. But things do happen, and we see it all the time. We do 100% of any sort of claims management LOA for our clients, and we have seen the gamut.
Some tools that we love, I think on the HR side, we use Rippling, which I have a love-hate relationship with. I think they are great in the sense that they continue, they're a startup, so they continue to build, they're adding new tools all the time, so it's helpful, but sometimes because they're a startup, there's also things that haven't been really thought through or built properly. We liked it though. It was really helpful because it provides not only like benefits management, onboarding, it does training, it does MDM, which is helpful. I think whatever tools you pick on the HR side, just make sure that all the information is saved. We had to have, at one point we had to move HR system, and that was a nightmare because a lot of documents got lost, which is just really painful down the road. So that's on the HR side. But on the documentation, definitely Notion. We really like Notion, Google Doc, Google Drive. I think you can keep it pretty simple when you're starting out to really keep the cost low until you really need more tools.
We are a Rippling wholesaler.
I've used a lot of systems in my life. I agree with Tina. Notion, if you haven't used it, first of all, it's free for a long time. You can use a lot of Notion before you have to start to pay. It integrates very easily with Google Docs and Google Drive, so you can have live Google Drive documents on your Notion. It's also searchable. So it's very helpful to have. I do like Rippling. I like a lot of things about it. I think the tech integration, the ability to assign licenses directly through Rippling is a huge point in their favor. For me, I like to do it on my own, so I actually really like JustWorks as a DIY kind of system. Much more robust than Gusto. Also, a little more spendy, not terribly, but a little more spendy. You can also jump from JustWorks DIY to JustWorks PEO. PEOs are a big question you need to ask yourself. You need to determine a lot of things, I personally think, before you decide to go with a PEO. I tend to agree. If you're going to pay the price for a PEO, pay the price for a managed service. You're going to get a better situation overall. I personally love Centricity, but there's a lot of managed services out there. And as far as care with your information and care with your setup, it's going to be a much better situation. PEOs can be great if you're a huge company with a very large HR team already. But if you are not, PEOs can be very difficult to control and comprehend. So there's a lot in there. There's a lot of tools and resources out there. I think one of the biggest things is, what do you use? What works for you? When me and Maria are talking to different companies about their infrastructure and what platforms, and we're analyzing those type of situations, a big thing that comes up for us is, tell us what you like, what you don't like. Set up a spreadsheet that has all the things that you need. List them out, what you're looking for, the integrations that you need, and figure out what success on a platform looks like to you, and then verify all those different things for the different platforms you look at, and look at between 2 and 4 platforms. But you need to have an idea of what you're looking for before you go out and jump on a tool, or jump on a platform, or jump on a resource. I think that's where I see a lot of founders floundering, is you don't know what you're even looking for before you go out and grab something, and I think that can really hinder the process.
I spend a lot of time overseas, so I tend to work with a lot of remote workers. And I see that as a growing trend. So what's the implications here for like ops and HR?
It's complex. It's complex because of, number one, it kind of goes back to some technology. How do you keep everyone housed in one system so you have visibility? I want to be neutral, but I also want to explain my background. We decided to go 100% rippling for our clients about 7 years ago. They were young. We did that because we had a platform that wasn't growing with our clients' needs. Our clients were sophisticated, they're tech, they're remote, and they're growing. It's one world. So we have a lot of clients that need EOR out of the country. They might need an entity. They might have even independent contractors outside of their employees. So circling back to these technologies, it's not just a payroll company anymore. You're getting a software, but you have to know how to manage it. Our clients don't deal with rippling. We do 100% of our implementations. They contact us. They get a benefit specialist, an HR specialist, a payroll person. They are not contacting rippling for support. We are a high-touch, high-level type of customer service, but our cost is the same or less than a PEO or what you might pay a consultant. But managing remote workforce is complex in that. Are you talking about out of the country? Yeah. So you have to decide, am I going to establish an entity? Am I going to hire as an EOR? I think that employer of record EOR relationship, if they want to be paid and part of your company, is probably the easiest route to go, because all of these companies, I promise you, there is not a magical solution behind the scenes. ADP, the biggest commoditized payroll companies, are working with consultants in those countries, managing the payroll law, the time off, the holiday, the benefits, whatever it is that they're getting from that country specific to that person. So I think it's just easier and cleaner for you to outsource it. So you still have visibility, they still work for you, But it's all being, the currency conversion is done. One of the things about Rippling is the currency conversion on the spend. It's sophisticated. They are competing with Workday now on that level. But we chose it because we can customize it, which we do for every single client. So that might mean, hey, guess what? We're expanding into the UK now. What do we do? So, I mean, nobody can keep up with it. You can't even keep up with all the states these days. We now have mandated DBL, PFL in a handful of states that all have different, and that means paid family leave and disability, which you have to have. They are mandated. We have monopolistic work comp states. So meaning that you can't just go get work comp. In Hawaii, you cannot go get your own health insurance plans. They have to be specific to that state. So I would say outsourcing that and trying to just make sure that you're offloading that level of stress on yourself. Because to establish your own entity in those countries, it's expensive, and still you're not necessarily managing it. There are companies that do that, but it's clunky.
Definitely +1 for outsourcing. We had a team in Lithuania, a team in Canada, and a team in Amsterdam, and it was really difficult managing all these teams. So we, in the end, ended up outsourcing, and that was a lot easier. So I think depending on the size of your team, initially we would, if it just went off, we would add them as contractors. But once you have a large enough team, definitely outsourcing that function, I think, makes a lot of sense.
Are there any other questions?
I think we can just cover some of the visa aspects and payroll, how doing it wrong can impact visa processes.
One of the most common things I see are F1 visas where they are FICA exempt, and someone has been paying someone that's on a certain type of visa, and then they will go to file their personal income tax return, and they're like, oh, I wasn't supposed to pay FICA, a combination of Medicare, Social Security, 7.65%. The employer matches that. So then that requires not just the employee getting a new W-2, it requires the employer doing annual returns, corrected W-2s, which are known as W-2Cs, the employee getting a new one. So it impacts a lot of people. So we do track who do you have on a visa, what type of visa, and when does it expire. So that can all be managed in that technology, but it has to be touched and managed. And that's what we do, for example, for our clients. Or actually your back office HR team, and we're doing those things. But a lot of people, like you said, you don't know what you don't know. I wouldn't know how to build a technology that you're working on. That's not my job. I don't want to know. I know what I know. That's all I need to know at this point. But I learn all the time. So that's a great question. And we see those mistakes all the time. Also recruiting. We'll see people like, oh, we want to hire this person from France. I'm like, have you exhausted looking for this role in the States? No, this is just so-and-so's friend and they want to hire him. Well, that's actually not even legal. Are you going to get penalized? I don't know. But if you can hire in the States, it's cleaner, it's easier, and by law, you are supposed to have exhausted your search for that person in the United States. The INS rules are changing. E-Verify is huge now. We manage that for our clients, which means now there are states that are mandating E-Verify, which is authorizing the I-9, which is the authorization to work in the United States. So those things are changing all the time too. I keep looking at you. That wasn't your question. Maria's right behind you. So all sorts of reasons why at least having a technology where you can attach something to these employees is really critical. And as you probably some of you know, sponsoring a visa is expensive and it's not the easiest process. Doesn't mean we can't continue to do that. It just means that you want to make sure that they are here on the appropriate type of visa too, and that you're taxing it correctly, right?
Thank you so much, Jennifer, Tina. Thank you for being here. Thank you guys for showing up. And we'll definitely be doing this again. So keep it on.